Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Welcome to the Love Pod, everyone. I'm your host, Nathaniel, for today. I am really pleased to introduce our special guest, Mary Nunaley, who is a homeschooler, learning engineer, and who helps parents and grandparents reconnect with their children aged 3 to 11. Mary, you have a wonderful community called Connected Through Play, and you really foster this sense of activity and adventure and learning through fun and creativity. And I'm just so thrilled to have you on the show. We have the shared heart of homeschooling and just the benefits and importance of that parental connection, those intergenerational connections. So I'd love to just welcome you to introduce yourself more and let us know what is the passion behind what you do.
Sure. Well, Nathaniel, first of all, thank you. It was so great to meet you a while ago, and I'm excited to be on the show. One thing, slight correction here. I'm a former homeschool mom that's still very actively involved in the homeschool world,
Okay.
as both of
Okay.
my children are adults. And now I have a grandson that we are introducing into the homeschool world. So
Wonderful.
technically, it's not my child at this point, but we all continue to learn through play.
Hmm.
My daughter started out as a regular schooler and met some children at a summer camp and came
Hmm.
home and said, Mom, I want to homeschool. And
Oh,
so that was
awesome.
my first introduction to homeschooling. And my comment was, if we don't, because sometimes some of that, clash realities, and it was a good experience, except for math. That's a whole different story. And then my son, who's 8 years younger than my daughter, then just homeschooled his entire life, including taking some college courses as a high schooler.
Hmm.
And now he and I have been in business together as business partners for the last 9 years.
Oh,
So,
that's wonderful.
yeah. And I think a lot of that was because of those relationships we formed from homeschooling.
Hmm.
Not only did I know his strengths and his limitations, he and I, through the years, navigating curriculum and sports and everything, learned how to really mesh and work with each other. So,
Hmm.
lots of benefits that people don't imagine. My dad, when he was alive, was totally anti-homeschooling.
Okay.
And after he saw my daughter grow and blossom after a couple of years, he was quickly on board. So
Hmm.
my sister homeschooled her son, and now we're thinking, how we carry this tradition on with the grandchild.
Well, I've met a lot of parents, and when we talk about our little one homeschooling her, there's this common, fear that people have, like, well, how is she going to become socialized?
Yeah.
I find that's one of the most interesting things because I've talked to other homeschoolers, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that. This idea that they're not going to be able to participate in society at a certain level or to get along with people. And I've talked to homeschoolers, and it's usually the opposite. So I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Yes, it's funny that you bring that up because that is the number one question that I also get. We work a lot of homeschool fairs and stuff as well, meet a lot of homeschool families. And if you mean by socialization, learning how to sit in a desk with a bunch of other kids that are your same age and just follow instructions, then sure, you're probably going to miss out on that style of socialization.
Yeah.
However, in my experience with my own children and the other homeschoolers I met, they were better socialized because
Mm.
we would do field trips with all ages. They learned
Mhm.
how to interact and respond to adults, not just the teacher, the authority figure, but oh, let's ask this person questions and how do we do this? And you would see the older homeschool kids helping the younger homeschool kids,
Yeah.
which is far more useful when you think about the workplace,
Hmm.
when you think about entrepreneurship, whatever. But as I looked at my own career, I never worked as part of a team where everyone was the exact same age with the
Yeah.
exact same background.
Right.
And so being able to engage with a wider range of people actually socializes your child better and better prepares them for the world at large. The other thing is that they're able to ask better questions
Hmm.
because they're not being taught to the test. They're not
Hmm.
being taught to like, hey, we have this big high stakes test at the end of the school year, and so we're just going to give you these answers.
Hmm.
They're going out and asking people, why? Why do you do
Yeah.
this? Why did this happen? Why? But not generally not in a real annoying way. So it's just like, well, the year old can get physics, but as they get more thoughtful, tell out, how did you
Yeah.
do this? So I really think that socialization, we have to change our perspective on what socialization means.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, one example is conformity, and the other example is like, self-initiated learning and wonderment, and there's so many qualities that a child doesn't often get to explore in a formal classroom setting where, like, if it's time to do math, you can't go and do creative writing or go do
Hmm.
sculpting. And I feel like there's a huge wave of parents who are looking for alternatives. They've seen into the curriculum. They're concerned maybe about corporate agendas and things coming into the systems. And we know that the education system comes from essentially a large corporate agenda to breed
Yes.
employees and to have people in a system that you do prepare for the test. And there's always this, I feel like so much of our society, like, there's a lot of questions happening. It's like, well, why are we organized in this way? And a lot of it, I think, is in our language and this concept of authority. Like, who, we don't really consent often to these authority figures. We're just kind of shown like this is the way it is. But
Hmm.
I feel like the most the brightest among us as a species, the ones who push those boundaries, they think their own thoughts, they innovate new ways, they find a different authority within themselves, and they have to learn to trust that. And that's an important skill that isn't really cultivated in school. It usually has to kind of come from unlearning after going through all the conditioning process.
Exactly. I mean, and to that point of unlearning, one of the things that we were told by some other homeschool families when we first made that switch with my daughter is that for every year she was in, I'm going to use air quotes, real school, anticipate at least a month of decompression
Mm,
and learning. So, we started homeschooling in when she was in the sixth grade. So that was about 6 months of just kind of like, okay, how are we going to do this? Okay, no, you don't have to do this at exactly 8 o'clock. You don't have to do this at exactly 9 o'clock.
mhm,
And because I also worked full time, there were a lot of people like, well, how do you do homeschooling and work full time? It's like, well, there's nothing that says that you have to take classes at 8 o'clock in the morning.
mhm,
And so my dad helped out. The kids got to be with him during the day when I was at work. And then we did homeschooling in the afternoon and the evening, and my children thrived because it
mm,
was also better aligned with their body system and their
yeah,
time schedules.
yeah,
So they weren't getting up at 5:30 in the morning so that I could grab a quick breakfast with them, drop them off at school, go to work,
yeah,
and they're still like all groggy. And now they're just like, oh, I'm functioning at my peak.
mhm,
And they can read at grandpa's house. They can research at grandpa's house. It's not, and there wasn't homework in that sense
mhm.
because your whole day was school.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of life is this, ongoing learning. I feel like my background this, and I've looked a lot of different community models and way that was learnings happen. And it's interesting that your children have the experience of being with their grandfather, because in a lot of models of community development, it was organized by levels of vulnerability. So of course the children are the center, surrounded by the grandparents, and that relationship in particular is so mutually reciprocal, because the children can benefit from the wisdom, the stories,
Hmm.
just the character of the grandparents, and also the grandparents get to benefit from reliving their youthfulness and laughing and being around just the humor and just the joy of children. So it's such a natural way of organizing community, and then of course being supported by the women and the men in the community who have roles, and everyone has different roles. But I feel like that particular relationship between parents and grandparents is so vital, and those are the two age groups that have been segregated in our society.
Hmm.
We literally put both of them in institutions, and we pretend kind of like that's normal. And I feel like it's something that, if we really want to become an enlightened species, like, that has to dissolve, and we have to come back together, because there's purpose in both of those
Yeah, no, I
things.
so agree. I mean, because you could see my dad, my daughter's grandfather, my son's grandfather too. But long story, like by the time my son came along, my dad's health was deteriorating a lot. But he and my daughter really got to bond together, and just you could see him getting more youthful. You could see him having
Mm,
more fun. The playful side of my dad that I remember as a kid came
mm,
back out
mm,
because now he had this young human, and they had their rituals. Like, here's the movie we're going to watch together, and here's the snack we're going to have together, and here's the stories that grandpa's going to tell me. And it's just like, it was so cool watching that happen.
yeah.
And again, thinking about socialization, so many kids today don't have that opportunity.
Mm,
to get that wisdom from the older generation. It's more of it's the obligatory visit to the grandparent as opposed to the joyful visit with the grandparent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, joy is the key. That keeps coming up a lot, and I feel like children remind us of our innate nature, and I,
Hmm.
I feel like when we're at our best, when we're harmonized with our true roles as human beings and we're connected to a Mother Earth and we're in a more wholesome and harmonious way, we are in joy. And I feel like, are such in that they were the importance of life, being
Hmm.
joyful. Can you talk a little bit about, your community and the focus on play and why play is so important for all ages?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's as you're talking about the connection and everything, we've come to a point, in my opinion, where so much focus is on the test, the passing, the
Mm,
next raise, the next promotion, that we become very one track.
mm,
And it's all about what's ahead. And so for me, the whole concept of connected through play is that children in many situations, adults learn better in a low stress environment. If you think about your daughter, I look at my grandson, I think about my kids too. They continually repeat things and try things out, but it's not high stakes.
mm,
It's like as I'm watching my grandson starting to learn how to walk, he falls down, he gets back up. There's no pressure other than, let's make sure he doesn't fall down the stairs or something. But there's no pressure for him to like, okay, you have to learn how to walk in the next two
mm.
weeks. And if you don't, your whole life is going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And so watching the playfulness that children have when they're allowed to be themselves and just free form play
Mm,
is really vital to me.
yeah.
In my work that I do with adults, it's that same thing. How do we build in some of that joy of learning? Not because I just have to do it to say, tick off the box and say, yes, I passed this training course. But how do we bring some of that joyfulness back? How do we give adults and children, and this is again the key part with play, the opportunity to fail with no risk?
Mm, hmm.
And you can do that in play. Like when you think
So
about
important.
games, you play games, sure, there might be a winner or a loser, but that's not the key point.
Hmm.
The key point is let's have fun. Let's see what happened.
Yeah.
I'm playing with teenagers. We're playing Monopoly, a game that most people are familiar with.
Yeah.
Well, what was my strategy? Like, what happened when I bought all of these houses and then nobody landed on them? Well,
Hmm.
now how do we take that into the real world and say, okay, so now think about when we played Monopoly and you spent all your money on this one thing and you got no return from it.
Hmm.
Now you're saying, oh, I want to go out and buy this like fancy sports car. I'm 18 years old and go back to that Monopoly game and think about what happened.
Yeah.
So now we're not saying don't do it. We're saying think about what happened in this low stakes, low risk environment and now apply that to a real world situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much value in that in so many different ways. And when we're in a playful state, our guards are down and we're able to
Hmm.
expand and to imaginate and to connect not only with other human beings but with life itself in new ways. And I
Hmm.
feel like this has always been at the core of our species. Like we are a creative, innovative species, and a lot of um, that can be really squeezed out when we are put in these like one track situations where a lot of those pressures are based on fear, right? Like if
Hmm.
I need to move forward or else there's this. And when we know that when people are in fear, they're not creative, they're not in their genius. And I
That's
feel like
it.
you actually feel like the big leap,
Hmm.
any problem, unless if it seems a problem where we all have how good we allow ourselves to feel and how much abundance we will allow ourselves to receive. And when we find subconscious ways of sabotaging ourselves when we pass those limits. And I wondered about why is that so universal, and I feel like a lot of it stems from these indoctrinations and these beliefs that we pick up, whether it's, vicariously through, intergenerational beliefs that have been passed down, or just very like poignantly in institutions, which I mean, it's very easy to start associating self-worth and self-value with how well you do on a test, how
Hmm.
smart you are in a certain way. And that can, I mean, for me, I learned to do very well in school. I was probably undiagnosed neurodivergent kid. I always found everything interesting. But when we were in Alberta, which is where I grew up, I was like a D student. I didn't like doing homework. I would forget
Hmm.
about it because I would just get so lost in wonder. And then I would remember being in the class, the teacher would be like, pull your homework, and I'd be like, my stomach would like sink. I'd be like, oh my good, can I go to the bathroom? And I'd
Right.
go and I'd sometimes make myself sick to go home and stuff. And I was anxious.
Hmm.
And then my parents moved us to Quebec, and I had to do French. So I went from French immersion to French, straight French school. And it was the first time I was really put in a place of failure, and the risk seemed very real. Like if I fail this grade, and a lot of children failed in that system in Quebec. And I learned to be so hyper focused out of fear that when we did eventually come to Ontario, I was all these provinces have different educational systems. So it was like going back into like primary school essentially. So I
Hmm.
went from a high school in Quebec to a primary school, and it was like a joke, but I became so serious that I was like memorizing textbooks and stuff. And so I learned to do very well, and I would have been seen as one of the smart kids in the class, but I was stressed out, and there was very little play in my life, and my social life was
Hmm.
not good because of that fear. Um, so play
Yeah,
is
and
so important.
oh, it is. And I see, and I was guilty of this as well. We're living our lives sometimes through our children.
Mm,
And so it's, be on that sport team, be on the travel team, be the best player, and as I started pulling back, some of the things that I realized first when you were saying about the, neurodivergent, those were not terms when I was a kid, but it
hmm
was definitely there. I mean, I remember writing papers on the public transportation bus that I would take to high school at
mm,
the last minute, and my best friend would get so mad because I would get an A and she would like spend hours in research and
mm.
whatever, and I'm like, I'm on the bus just scribbling stuff because I had that interest in everything too. And then
Yeah,
it's like, oh wait, now I have to put it on a paper and turn it in, and somebody's going to give me marks on it. And
yeah,
it's like, okay, blah, blah, blah. Because I had all this knowledge in my head because I
mhm,
was like deep diving into these books and stuff.
yeah,
I could pull things out, but it was never fun. It
mm,
was just, and so moving forward, I taught at a junior college or community college for several years.
okay,
And I was in a career program. And what I used to tell my students is disregard everything that you're general education and business teachers are telling you about how your grades are going to matter, how you have to do this, I have to do that. If you're applying for a specific scholarship, those are the hoops you have to go through. But
mm,
let me tell you, in the practical world, I would more often hire a C or D student that had real experience and could bring some ideas to the table
yeah,
than somebody who is straight A and just book smart.
yeah,
And my students would just look at me like I had lost my mind. I'm like, I know I'm telling you things that are contrary to everything you've been told your whole life. But as
hmm
someone who's actually been out in the world managing restaurants and managing people, I don't look for the straight A. I look for the person that can get the job done,
hmm
that can bring new ideas. I like
yeah,
so but I was the minority, especially in a college
sure,
system, telling people like, "Don't worry about your grades."
yeah.
They're like, "What are you doing, Nunley?" And it's like, "It's not important." Um, but
Yeah. And that's the
we
truth, right? That so many people find out after. It's like, oh, a lot of the dropouts, they're the ones who,
that's it.
and they went and started a business,
Yeah,
either out of necessity or just they were practical people and saw the kind of the hoops that we are forced to jump through are not always, in our best interest. It's just, it's just kind of ticking off boxes on another person's kind of
that's it.
agenda. Yeah.
So we try to bring play into that too. It's like I taught hotel restaurant management, and so we would start the purchasing course of the semester of, okay, you have a fairy godmother or godfather, your pick. I don't really care. But what this fairy god person is doing is she's giving you an unlimited budget, which is not real world, but we want to just learn the skills. But at the end of the semester, you're going to build me an entire restaurant on paper. You're
Mm,
going to buy all the equipment, you're going to cost your menu out, you're going to do all this,
cool.
and we made it playful. And then they
hmm
had to do a presentation with menu items, and I brought in other faculty members to judge their food, because there's usually at least one chef in training in the course, and they were just like, I learned more from this and this experience of playfully building a restaurant than I ever would if I just lectured from the textbook.
Yeah. Yeah. I really believe in project-based learning as well. And one of the things I've noticed in the kind of underlying belief in mainstream educational models anyways is that, you prepare to contribute to the world, basically. And that can be like 20 years of preparation before you actively contribute.
Hmm.
This idea of getting ready to to be of service in some way. And I really feel like that's a mistake because I feel like so many young children are inspired and have creative ideas and are if they were given the environment in which they could see that they can start contributing to communities, to neighborhoods, to and really that was encouraged. And just part of the way life is like you just help, and you just lend a hand and you do what others, and there's such a learning
Hmm.
that happens in that, and that happens really in a practical way in project-based learning. I remember that when I was running an Indigenous Student Center at a college where I taught for some years, and we had some 12-year-old students come in from a community center, and they had created a whole business with hydroponic grow towers with
Oh,
growing
neat.
herbs and lettuces, and they were providing these greens to local restaurants, and they were learning all the business skills like accounting, managing the money and all this stuff. And the
Hmm.
students came in and actually did a workshop for the college students. We were basically given a tower to grow food. And the sad part was that because just I think the nature of the organization of college is like gets to a certain point, like the students are just have all these assignments due, and it basically fell upon me to take care of this tower because none of the students
Hmm.
were doing it. So here we had these 12-year-olds who had a full functioning business, growing
Wow.
greens and supplying restaurants, and they're coming in educating college level students, and the college level students are just so engrossed with their studies that they just don't even see the value and the potential of that, and a lot of them
Right.
were actually horticultural and restaurant students,
Oh,
like
wow.
hospitality students. So I'm like, there's a disconnect here. Like,
There is.
these 12-year-olds are already making coin,
That's right. These 12-year-olds are basically going to outshine you in the workplace because
Yeah.
they've got all this real experience. Well, and bringing it back to homeschooling a little bit too, when we are talking about earlier, in a more traditional school setting, it's just like you have creative writing at one time, you have math at one
Hmm.
time, and one of the things that I incorporated and many of the more successful homeschool families I know incorporated into their day was rather than that traditional structure of subject by subject, is let's pick a topic that we're going to deep dive into
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
apply all aspects. So let's say we were studying colonial United States, 1600s to whatever. Well, instead of having it as standalone units, it's like, okay, so now let's explore the geography. How did they get here from Europe? What was life on the sea like? Oh, well, look, now there's math
Hmm.
because now you got to calculate distance and
Hmm.
time. And oh,
Hmm.
look, and now there's science. Oh, and look, now we're going to practice. Now we're going to cook some food from a recipe that we found online or in a cookbook. Well, now we got math. Now we got science. Now we got social studies. Now we have food preparation, and so you can build these really robust experiences for your
Hmm.
children because you're not segmenting things. So now when you're studying math, the math makes sense.
Yeah.
Now when you're studying science, the science makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's just like this giant lesson that ties it all together. And now we're having a real life experience. And maybe the culmination is you make a meal for your family, and you let them know,
Yeah.
like, hey, these are, foods that we probably don't get around here. Like, I don't know where to get pemmican, but we can make jerky.
We don't want to eat pemmican.
But you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
things that the kid, but it's like, okay, but we can make our own jerky.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could, and so now we get to experience like, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, what do you mean we can't use the food processor and the mixer to make the bread? What? I
Mm.
have to do the dough by hand? It's like, yeah, I'm not going to make you like grind the grain because that would be
Yeah.
hard to find, but they also begin to experience what life is for other people.
Sure. So
And then when you
important.
think about the indigenous cultures that you work with, indigenous people, there's some of those same things that they're still doing today.
Mhm. Mhm.
And now you're providing your children with the opportunity to go like, oh, wait, wait, there's people in other parts of the world that are still doing this? Like they don't have a microwave? What are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I remember when Julie and I went on a quest out west, when everything kind of flipped upside down, and for so many of our lives with the lockdowns and stuff, we're just like we're looking for conscious community. And our question was, how can we serve conscious community? And we knew education was a big part of that. And we were exposed to a lot of different models. And some of our friends at West introduced us to um, a model that's used in the taiga of Russia. It's called the School of Life. And it's tied to the Ringing Cedars of Russia series. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
Hmm.
I saw a video on it. It was called The School of Life. And it's exactly what you just described, Mary. I mean, it was a little different because the students would actually go and live in the school, but they worked in pods. And it was interesting because the teachers were not like teachers, they were more like facilitators and space holders. The students were actually the teachers, and they taught one another. And how they did it was they would have pods of, I think it was like ages 7 to 21, and they would all be a mixed group, and they would be, I don't know if it was like pods of like 8 to 12 students or something like that. And they would study materials like subject matter exhaustively, and different pods would be focused on different things. So one pod would be focused on like chemistry, just the whole field of chemistry. Another pod maybe, I don't know, biology or whatever. And exactly what you said, there was this interconnection of all things. Like we know everything's connected to everything. So if you
Right.
study one thing really passionately, whether it's like music or or like astronomy or something, it starts opening up all these other fields of interconnection. And you can develop all those faculties through one thing. So I really thought that was really interesting. And the other thing was that, you know, learning math, if you're a 7-year-old learning math from a 12-year-old, it can be way easier to absorb, because
Hmm.
as teachers become like subject matter experts or whatever, they often forget all the steps they had to go to really have go through the learning, and they're just like, why don't you get it, and so I feel like that's another really interesting thing when you talk about having different ages in groups. And so I feel like this is even more like from homeschooling to really community-based education, where
Hmm.
there's that there are those dynamics that can happen in different ways.
Yes, and the math is so true. My daughter, when she started doing advanced math, my son would end up running screaming from the room because just the whole math thing, and math was not my thing. So I did send her to a co-op where somebody who actually knew math could help
Mhm,
her with it. But my poor son would run screaming because there were so many tears and stuff. But because of the 8-year difference between the two, she
mhm.
was really good at helping him learn those basics because she was approaching it from the perspective of a 12-year-old helping a 4-year-old
Yeah.
or a 13-year-old helping a 5-year-old, as opposed to me going, this is the way I was taught in school, and this is how we're going to do long division, and this is how we're going to do this. And I don't know why. This is just what I was taught, where
Mhm.
she could come and show him, like, okay, here's some tricks. And then the other part was, and here's how you get mom for not getting mad at you, and here's how you.
And it's bonding for them too, right?
It
And
is. It
also it
really is.
reinforces the learning in your daughter, because now
Hmm.
I remember when I did some peer tutoring of math, it was like some students really had a hard time, so I had to find like 5 or 6 ways sometimes of explaining the same thing, and that just solidified my own learning. So I feel
That's
like
it.
teaching is one of the most important ways of learning, and there isn't a lot of opportunities given in formal traditional education for students to teach. It's like you might do a presentation, or you might, be called up to, but that's nerve-wracking. But just in an organic way of like, okay, I really want to help this person learn, that really can help expand your own understanding of the
It,
material.
yes, I mean, that is one of the best ways. And then the other trick for homeschoolers or regular schoolers, tie everything to food. And I say that because all
Mm.
ages. And so back in the early days of computers, for example, I had to teach some faculty that are very brilliant, PhD level in their area of expertise, but trying to explain to them how to zip and unzip a file, I had people in class in tears.
Really?
And again, think back though, this is like
Yeah,
early
yeah.
1990s where it was all new and they were just frustrated. And it's like you're saying, how do I explain this in a way? So it's like, okay, how many of you have ever been to a grocery store? And everybody raises their hand. How many of you had to shop the aisles and put food into your grocery cart?
Mm.
Everybody raises their hand. How many of you go to check out and the bagger shoves everything into one or two bags? And pretty much everyone raises their hand. I'm like, that's zipping. And they're just like, what? I'm like, yeah, you're taking a whole bunch of stuff and you're compressing it into a small area. It's like now you take your groceries home and you take everything out and you put it out on the counter and the bread like comes back to life. I'm like, that's unzipping. And that example
Mhm.
they were able to relate to because it was something that
Mm.
they did and something that they were familiar with. And so that
Yeah.
weird topic which to me was very easy, compressing, uncompressing, but they're
Hmm.
just like, so if it's finding those commonalities, whether
Yeah.
it's with your kids or not. So this is why I'm going to take the conversation hostage for just a second.
Go ahead.
'Cause
Go ahead. Yeah.
one of the things that we're doing in my community right now is this
Hmm.
scavenger hunt.
Okay.
And my friend Adam kind of set me down this path, and I tweaked it for families. What I did was I asked everybody to give me four colors,
Okay.
four fruits, four things you find outside, and four physical actions you can take.
Mm.
Okay, so then I compiled everybody's responses to just make one scavenger hunt card. So
Okay.
now every card has a grid that has four colors, four fruits, four things outdoors, and four actions. What you're going to do though is you go cross horizontally, for example, or vertically, and you are going to make one photograph that has all four things. So maybe the color was green and the fruit was an apple. And the action was jumping jacks, and the outdoor thing was a tree. So you're going to be holding a green apple, for example, next to a tree doing a jumping jack. But it's not about winning or losing. It's
Yeah.
about that creative spark. It's
Hmm.
about getting your family or your friends together to go, how are we going to handle this? And
Mm.
I have some fruits that are also colors. So it's like, well, is it the color orange or is it the fruit orange? I'm like, you decide. I'm not going to tell you. You decide based on what you have available.
Yeah.
But again, it's trying to apply all of those. And then how do we get the math and the science, and how do we strategically make this happen? And so this is where that playfulness comes in, and the
Yeah.
building the family memories and the connecting, especially when you're like going to your neighbors going, hey, can you take a picture of me? My kids and I are going to be like doing a jumping jack holding an apple in
Mm.
front of a tree, but we
Mm.
don't have a, we can't take the picture too. And then people start going, what is wrong with this family?
Well, creative problem solving and just creative expression, I think, is at the heart of all of the subjects you mentioned, and I feel like we have a tendency to forget that. We have this we live in I feel like a very secular dogmatic society now where, kind of religion has become, or science has become the new religion, where it's like we just think, well, science is this, pure way of knowing things, and math is this pure language, and we forget the creative origins of these things,
Hmm.
and the history of where these things come from. And so I feel like, creative faculty and developing that in a family as well, that can remedy a lot of things, from like screen addiction to like the disconnection that a lot of people feel, to, like all kinds of addictions, actually, when a family becomes more cohesive and focused on being creative together. I think that is so essential. And it's because we live in a world where it's so easy to be distracted. So yeah, I'd
Hmm.
love, because I know you help people with like screen addiction and stuff too, Mary. Can you talk a
Right.
little bit about, yeah, the benefits that you've seen kind of fostering this kind of activity in your community?
Sure. And so I'll start with some of the feedback that I've gotten from some of the parents and grandparents in the community, which is, and even non-parents that have said, hey, I've got nieces and nephews. I don't have my own children. I never know what to do with them. So,
Mm,
they're just on their phone playing a game. I don't know what to do. And the comments have been, this has been really helpful because I give them activities or provide activities. And I also break it down by age so that you can take a similar activity and apply different levels of learning or layers
mm,
of learning based on the age of the child. So something that's going to work with a 3 to 5 year old isn't necessarily going to go over very well with a 9 or an 11-year-old.
mm,
But here's how you make it harder. Here's how you make it easier. And what I'm finding is that families want to do this. Even the kids want to do this. They just don't know how to start,
mm.
how to have that conversation, because the default is let's just go to the phone. I'm bored,
Yeah,
let's go to the phone.
yeah,
But if you start building this culture in your family of, well, let's do an experiment in the kitchen. Or
yeah,
let's go do this wacky scavenger hunt. Hey, I'm in this group online. Let's go try this out. Or,
yeah.
you know, and right now I'm doing themed weeks where it's not math problems. It's how do you see math in nature?
Mm,
How does math show up? How does science show up? Um, one post that I had that's gotten a lot of, interest from folks is talking about how everything is connected,
mhm.
just like the forest. And then, how do trees communicate with each other? Now, how do we expand that out into our community? So going back to
Mm,
what you were saying,
yeah.
but it's giving parents ideas so that it's not just, we'll put the phone down,
Yeah.
put the phone down, get off the phone. It's,
Right.
hey, let's go have an
You got to
adventure.
replace it with something.
Yeah. And then also giving them some talking points. So when your
Yeah.
child pushes back, you have something to say to them and what
Mm,
that pushback often means, because many times we're just like, I just don't want to deal with it.
mm,
Well, if they say X, it might just mean that they're bored
mm,
or they're afraid of missing out.
mm.
And then my friend Max has a program specifically for teen boys and breaking screen addiction.
Okay.
And one of the things that he shares is how instead of just going cold turkey, you cut back by like 2 minutes a day.
Okay.
And then you set focused times like, okay, I'm going to be on my phone at this time and this time. And I know a couple years ago, I took the Facebook app off my phone, which I still use for business,
Yeah.
but I found that I would just by default go to Facebook.
Hmm.
I took the app off my phone. So now I physically have to like reload the app each morning if I'm going to use it and make a conscious effort of what am I doing there and why? And
Hmm.
it's more to promote my business. It's not just mindless scrolling. Or in the case of like a local emergency, it's okay, is my house the only house without power? Is anybody else having this issue? But it makes a big difference. And I think if we can start implementing that with our children wherever they're at,
Yeah.
and having I have some activities where it's ask them what benefit, how do they feel when they're on
Mm,
social media?
hmm.
What does that make them feel like? How does that make them feel with their friends? Do they feel like they're missing out? Well, maybe you could start having cool in real life adventures
Yeah.
so that now the kids are feeling like, oh man, I'm missing out because I'm just on the phone doing this.
I think that's the win. I think that, real community engagement, real because at the heart of humankind is we're I think that that's what makes us thrive. We're social organisms and we need connection with one another. And it's so important. So yeah, I love those approaches. I know a lot of parents are struggling with that. How do I get my child to, off the phone? I remember my parents really they were very reluctantly got me a Nintendo Entertainment System, like the original Nintendo
Uh-huh.
when I was young. And I remember them being like, okay, but you can only do this like an hour a day or something. And that quickly, like, I would just get so immersed there and they kind of lost
Right.
control. But it's interesting now, I don't play video games because they didn't really try to control me so much as they communicated with me and always said, they reminded me of my choices. And I feel like we need ways that are inviting and are fun and that include people because just, shaming people or trying to change behavior from a point of control, we just know that doesn't work.
Hmm.
We had another guest talking about the importance of being, our presence with children and not yelling at children and to stay calm. Like, and we know that a lot of the patterns that we see in children's are just evoking like unresolved things that are maybe from our childhood or whatnot. So
Hmm.
creating like ways that create connection through playfulness. I feel like, you know, in all families, there's this, well, maybe I shouldn't speak for all families. I know in my direct experience, there was this like longing to connect more deeply with family. And I come from a very working class family. So it was always like about work and working, living in the country was always that. So, I would make fun of things like, um, chopping firewood. I would make it a game, and I prefer to
Hmm.
chop firewood by hand than using the tractor and the compression system. And just because like it's how much cut firewood. So I feel like when you're in learning opportunities, there's ways of finding opportunities to for that creative expansion to occur. And that requires like a conscious effort. Like you said, when you're
Hmm.
going on Facebook or you're doing something intentionally, it's another level of mastery. So how important do you find it is for the parents um, in their learning journey, in their, cultivating their purpose, it is for them to like what do you find are the best skills for the parents to focus on developing to give their children the best kind of experience with homeschooling?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, first of all, just bear in mind that you're modeling that behavior to your children all the time.
Mm,
And so if you want to cultivate curiosity in them, you have to model curiosity. And I think about my dad, who, I grew up pre-internet. pre-computer. Like he brought home the first Apple computer for our neighborhood. But he was a high school dropout. He dropped out of high school to go fight in World War II. Probably one of the smartest men I ever knew.
Mm,
And what he cultivated in us is that curiosity. So we would sit there and read the dictionary for fun.
mm, mm.
We would read the back of cereal boxes, but he would model that same behavior. So that would be one of the first things I would say to parents is you can't tell your kids to be curious if you're not modeling curiosity
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, exactly.
The other part goes along with
Mm,
that
love it.
is how do you handle failure? If you blow a gasket because something went wrong, then your kids are going to think, okay, it always has to be right. So maybe it's, I said that I was only going to go on Facebook for 15 minutes in a day, and I know that I was on for an hour. Here's what happened. I saw a friend that was struggling with something, and so I was having a conversation with them in Messenger to help them. Or, oh, I saw this really fun cat video that led me to another cat video that led me to another cat video. Because you're showing your children that when you're setting these rules for them, you're still, you're doing your best, but you still mess up.
Mm,
But then have that conversation with them, or even say, okay, a lot of families have quarter jars,
mm.
where if you say an inappropriate word, something goes in the quarter jar. Well, maybe you set up a quarter jar for the behavior that you're trying to change as a family.
Mm,
Like, if you say 15 minutes and everybody's spending 30, well, that quarter jar, but then use it for something fun that you can do as a family.
mm.
So when the quarter jar gets full, then, we go out to dinner together, or we get ice cream, or we have pizza or something like that. So it's,
Yeah.
again, you're rewarding the behavior that you want, and the punishment is making people more aware. Because while you eventually want to go out and have a fun meal together or something, the goal is to not fill that jar up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But then you can hold each other accountable, like, I saw you, it was 30 minutes, go put something in the jar.
Yeah.
But it,
Yeah,
it,
it's
it
bringing awareness, right?
it's bringing awareness, but it's also giving your children sort of a little sense of agency as well.
Mm, mm-hmm,
That it's not just mom or dad saying, well, the rules apply to you only and not to me.
mm-hmm,
Now, as a family unit, we've agreed to this.
mm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, you know what? It's okay for you to call me on this because as a family, we agreed.
Yeah.
So it's also showing that your voice as the child or a teen also carries some weight
Yeah.
because in
Very
so many
important.
situations, it's just do as I say.
Yeah.
And so
And
this, yeah.
just because I say.
Right, yeah. Because I said so, I'm the mom, I said so.
Yeah.
But this way, it also allows them to know that occasionally, not always, but in some situations, it is okay to push back against authority or to
Hmm.
say, and again, this is done in a respectful manner,
Hmm.
but it helps. So those
Yeah.
would be two things that I would say to homeschool families right away. The other thing I would say is much like you were saying with the chopping wood, find a way to make it fun, find a way to make it playful. you know, when you're learning your times tables or you're memorizing certain things, let's play a game with it. As you're driving down the road and you see a license plate that has that letter, okay, great. Give me a word that starts with that letter.
Hmm.
As the kids get older, it can be more geography based or whatever it is that you're studying. But now they're having fun. And you're still like, in the car using their memory, helping them kind of master things without just like go sit down and memorize a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's like gamifying life, right?
Hmm.
Now, I'm curious because you have so many different perspectives in your community, Mary, and you have like a lot of I'd imagine part of the discussion with these times of like emergent technologies and things. I bet a lot of parents are wondering or concerned or like they're asking or talking about using AI or maybe like virtual reality and like or also even like maker spaces. There's all these emergent technologies that are coming to surface. What's your perspective on like where the pulse is at with the parents that you work with and what's kind of like the main points of those conversations?
Yeah, no, great question, especially around AI, which is a big thing right now.
Mhm.
Um, my stance on it is AI is a tool.
Mhm.
It can be used for good or it can be used for not good.
Mhm.
And the example I share with the community is think of a hammer. A hammer in the hands of a skilled carpenter can be used to create some amazing things.
Mhm.
A hammer in the hands of a skilled serial killer
Mhm.
can be used for some not so amazing things.
Mhm.
But the hammer is just a tool.
Mm,
And so when it comes to AI, it's also about having those conversations that are age appropriate. What are the environmental impacts? What are the
mm,
physical impacts? What kind of information do you want to share with the AI that you don't know where it's going?
mm,
So be safe, be smart, but it's still just a tool to help you create. I use AI regularly, but
mm,
I don't share financial information. I don't say share geographic information. But I'll use it to help me clean up my writing. I'll
mm,
use it to help me create art because I'm not an artist. I mean,
mm.
in the sense of like, I can draw stick figures and I can crochet things, but if you want like a graphic, AI has been great because I have
Yeah,
all these ideas in my head. I just don't know how to make them come to life.
yeah, yeah.
But then having those conversations about when and how, and with homeschoolers, using AI can be really beneficial. One of the things that's really effective is, let's say that your child is writing a paper, and I'm going to gear this more towards tweens and teens, not sort of the under 11-year-old set. The assignment is to write a paper, the history of Christmas. Write your paper, load it into AI, and say, review my paper and give me feedback as an English teacher grading a paper.
Hmm.
Okay, now review my paper as somebody who's expert in the history of Christmas and give me feedback.
Mm, mm.
Now review my paper as someone, whatever the kid's interested, so that
Mm.
they get three different perspectives too, because that's
Yeah.
not something that I can bring to the table.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. It is a very powerful tool. And I love that kind of way because I feel like a lot of the concern is around the generative power of AI, but I think the real value is more as a mirror. It's like if you
Mhm.
use it as a co-creative tool, some ways I've used it is like I will do manual hand drawing and then I'll take a picture and then I'll augment it somehow, and then I'll take that image and I will do more layering upon it. And so it's a wonderful co-creative tool. Um, and the risk I feel when it's just used purely for generative, I mean, there's a soul to things we know. I mean, I've seen this happen in the classroom setting, and I mean we can see it in school too when someone's just posting something that's totally AI generated and doesn't have that that essence of a human
Mhm.
voice is very apparent. And it's interesting that we have that ability to discern. Maybe not everyone does, but I feel like it's interesting that you can tell when something is not written by a human. It's like we have that sensitivity, and and that it is an important conversation because I feel like there can be a lot of lost opportunity for skill development or even loss of faculty when there is a dependency. But when it's used in the ways that you're talking about, what a great way of adding, layered perspectives around one thing that you've created. And it can give you so much insight into, and you can even, I mean, you can be so specific with AI. You can just be like, what would Wayne Dyer say about this paper? What would, you know, uh,
Exactly.
like any individual you could say. And I
What
feel
would
like
Charles
that's
Dickens say about it? Because he
exactly,
wrote the
yeah,
Christmas Carol. Yeah,
yeah,
and in my own process, I'll just say, okay, look, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm up. I need to do this thing. Here's what I've written. Can you help me make it coherent?
mm,
But it's my original work, and it would
mhm,
be like me going to a friend saying, "Can you just read this? And is it flowing logically?"
yeah,
But it's you got to have a starting place first, and
yes,
then, just like you're saying, teaching your children how to notice something that's AI generated versus non-AI generated. And a year ago, it was really easy to
hmm
pick out AI art that was created. Now the models have gotten so much better that it's
mm,
harder and harder. Like we don't have the six-fingered people as much, and we don't
yeah,
have the, weird feet. So the other thing I recommend people is, let's like get a free trial to something like 11 Labs, which is a
mm,
voice generating software, and just listen to some of the voices, because there are ads now that are popping up on YouTube. I'm like, oh, that's that voice from 11
yeah,
Labs. Oh, that's,
yeah,
and so teaching people how to discern
yeah.
even those kinds of telltale signs, not good nor bad, but just to help you like fact
Mhm.
check.
Yeah, discernment, I think, is one of the most important skills that we all need to develop in this current time. Because I mean, the videos are getting so insanely real that,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of people who are being bamboozled. They don't know, and they're
Hmm.
seeing things. They're like, "Wow, that's so incredible." It's like, and I look at it, I'm like, "Well, that's clearly
Right,
AI." But I have
exactly.
the eyes to seek just because I'm aware of like some of the potential of the tools. So yeah, no, very valuable insights, Mary. I appreciate that. What is your higher vision for our world? Where would you like to see us moving towards as a
Oh, great
as a
question.
society?
So in my like heart of hearts, I want to create a movement to bring play back to
Mm,
everyday life
mm,
because we just have gotten so grumpy and so stressed about the world at large. And so my goal is to just inject play wherever I can and just make
that's
things
awesome.
more fun. I mean,
Yeah.
and this is the part where a lot of people are like, well, if it's fun, it can't be serious. And I beg to disagree. You can be serious and still have fun.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost that. We've
Mm,
really, really lost that. We've focused so much on just being serious. And you can see
mm,
it in our kids.
yeah.
And if we had more fun and we had more joy, I think the world would overall be a much better place.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah, and yeah, we can be very competent, we can be very professional, and I feel like it's also very attractive, from an entrepreneurial lens, like having fun and being able to play is because I feel like you say, in the heart of hearts, I feel like that's what most people want to return to a place where they feel safe enough to play and to just
Hmm.
be themselves. And I think when we can embody that as leaders, whether it's as a parent or as a teacher or in any context, really, it gives permission for others to embody that sense of play. And it does, I mean, lighthearted vision is it's lighthearted vision. And I have to catch myself a lot because I feel like our mission is so large. Like we're talking about world enlightenment, we're talking about, and I feel like there's a practical path to that. But I've been
Hmm.
saying for a long time, if it's not fun, no one's going to be interested. Uh, you
Right.
know, and I feel at our core, whatever you want to call it, the soulful self, the true self that we are children of the cosmos. We love laughing, we love having fun. And if someone is so wounded that they've totally pinched themselves off from that, those are usually the people that need our love and our playful expression the most because it allows them to eventually
Yes.
release the chains that are keeping them super tense, right? And
Hmm.
stressed. That's like the badge of the high achiever, right? Yeah, I remember working in some corporate settings and listening to the conversations, people like, "Oh, you don't know stress. I got stress. I worked 80 hours last week and all that stuff." And it's like seemed like a badge, like good for I have the most stress. I'm
No,
the most successful. And it's like
I'm
it's
just, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
right?
I'm just laughing because I mean, back in my first career where we were young and maybe not as smart, it was a badge of honor to say, hey, what do you mean you took a day off? I've worked for, 55 days straight without a day off,
Yeah.
30-hour shifts or whatever. And it was like, woo. But the thing was, it was in the hotel business.
Mm,
We all worked a lot of hours. There were a lot of high stress situations, but every night after work, we all went and had a whole lot of fun. And,
mm.
so it was still balancing
Yeah.
that with the fun, and
Yep.
it was what can we, we need to let that stress go. We need to let that tension go. And we bonded really well as a team because we
Yep.
worked hard, we played hard. But yeah, it is a badge of honor. It's just like, I've got more stress than you. I've got this title. I'm like, you know what? We're just going to have some fun here.
Yeah. Yeah, that word stress is interesting too, because I don't know the name of the individual. I think he was from Germany or something. It came and introduced this concept of stress. And it was actually not the proper interpretation of the word. Like what he intended to say was strain and how strain really affects our
Ah,
system. And that's why we have the two distinctions of stressors, like eustress, like stress that's good for you and it's like excitement, but you got to do it. And then there's distress, right? And we know that
mm-hmm,
distress is not good for our nervous system, especially prolonged chronic distress. But eustress is important for our growth, for our character development. It's important that we have challenges to overcome in life. But when we're in strain, that's when things break. And I feel like our
mm-hmm.
world has been in, it's getting a good mirror reflection of what strain does,
Yes.
whether it's, people who are not well, we have mental health challenges in
Mm-hmm,
society a lot. And I feel like the more that we can just find peace and wholesomeness and connection through play,
Yes.
I feel like that is what's going to just lighten our world a lot. So I appreciate the service that you're providing to the world, Mary, and I think it's a really important message. And on that note, so two things. Where can people connect with you? What's the best way of working with you and finding out more about what you do?
Sure. So if you're on school or you want to be on school, just search for Connected Through Play, or just type in the word play on the discovery bar. And then from a more professional standpoint, Mary Nunley on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to find me because I talk about game-based learning, gamification, learning design, those types of issues. So for somebody that's looking for more of like the theory,
Okay.
and that sort of thing. And you'll still see the Connected Through Play coming up as well, but I go more theoretical on
Mhm.
LinkedIn and more
Wonderful.
hands-on practical on school.
That's wonderful. What a good balance to have so that, you can appease to the professional audience and because there's a lot of entrepreneurs and
Hmm.
educators on LinkedIn. So that's great that you can give them that knowledge and put it to practice in school. That's
Yes.
a wonderful use of those two platforms. And lastly, I'd love to ask you, um, if you had a megaphone, you could talk to everyone in the world all at once and everyone could hear you. What would you share?
Just have fun.
That's great. Well, you've been a lot of fun. You are a wonderful presence, Mary. I really appreciate you having you on the show. Is there
Sure, it's
anything
been a
else you'd like
blast.
to share before I invite our daughter to come and say farewell to us for today?
Yeah, I would just say find a way to play every day. It
Mm,
doesn't have to be a board game. It doesn't have to be hardcore. And I know this is going to go anti to what we were talking about earlier. Even just a phone game for 5 minutes
mm, mm,
to
mm.
just have some fun. Because there are times when we just don't have an opportunity. Go play with your food. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what we're
yeah,
going to do next. We're going to go make an
yeah.
apple pie. So,
Oh, nice. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. We'll have a wonderful time playing apple pie. I mean, our daughter loves playing with food, and it's funny because when you get in your serious, parenting brain, if you don't take a step back and just look like she's just exploring and having fun, you'd be like,
mhm,
"Stop making a mess." So it's a lot of it's the meaning we give things, right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you talk about making apple pie. I had this vision when I was studying Indigenous wellness in college. This inspiration for community centers worldwide. And one of the things that the images was so clear to me was, having these spaces where the two doorways on either side of the doorways, a place for children to come, like a universal child care center, and then on the other space, like a universal place for grandparents and elders. And what I saw them doing was, when the parents would come and participate if they had work to do, that there would be opportunities for those two groups to do things together. And I saw gardens all around these
Oh,
community
yes.
centers with like fresh apples and fruit and stuff. And part of that adventure would be like, okay, let's go pick some food and let's make an apple pie with that. And
Oh, I
that was
love it.
always a kind of an image. And I think, we need community more than ever. So thank you for being a
Mhm.
community builder. I think it's so important. And if you ever want to come do a workshop in Light Her Vision, like a play-based workshop, you're always welcome to do that
I
as
would
well,
love
Mary.
to. Let's
Okay.
talk.
Okay. Sounds great. Sounds great. Thank you again. And to
I was gonna
all
say
of the
this was fun. So,
Yeah, okay, good. It's funny. I've been holding like fiddling around with some silly putty, and it's funny.
uh-huh.
It's got a monkey on it, so I call our little daughter
Oh, okay.
a monkey. I call her,
Uh-huh.
but her name is Luciana, and she calls herself Nana. So I said, "Are you?" One day I was sitting there at the table, and she's just starting to really articulate her sentences, and she really caught me off like by surprise. I said, "Are you a banana, Nana?" And she looked at me and she said, "No, I am not. I am a monkey, a little one." And I was like, "Since
Oh,
when do you talk like
wow.
this?"
That's amazing.
Oh yeah. So yeah, you made me think. So yeah, the silly putty. Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yeah, just little playthings.
yeah.
I have all kinds of little toys and stuff on my desk to play with during those stressful moments.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Well, thank you for the beautiful reminder to play every day. I'm certainly gonna take that to heart and practice that. I
Excellent.
just feel like that's what we all need to do to decompress and to remember that life is for us and to not take ourselves too seriously. So
That's
thank you
it.
again. Thank you again,
Thank
Mary.
you.
for watching.
Thank you for watching.
Say have a great day.
Have a good day.
I love you.
I love you.
See you soon.
Soon.
Hey, bye. Bye, Joel.